Yeah, I don't
absolutely right.
know.
This
It's
is
just what
great.
I've been thinking about as I was thinking about
Yeah.
your theme. Like, how do we heal any of this? And it almost comes down to one of the thoughts that I had was, well, being able to experience lower levels of pain sooner
Interesting. Say more.
and developing a degree of understanding that, oh, I can feel this pain and I'm not going to die
Right. Right.
because they felt it before and they didn't die, right? When they were 3 and 4 and 5, they slid down that slip and slide. They climbed up the 12 rungs that it takes to get to the top of the burning hot metal slide. And they slid down and they screamed because it was so fast and so hot. And they landed on the ground at the bottom with a thud. And in that moment, they decide whether they're going to cry or whether they're going to giggle. And a lot of that has to do with who's looking at them in that moment. How are they responding, right? Are they responding with alarm or are they laughing? And that's the parent usually, right?
Right.
It's like, oh no, here we go. Let's get back up again, or like with alarm and shock. And are you okay? And, and not unreasonable concern, but how in that moment do we respond when our young children are wondering whether they should be upset or not, whether that hurt was too much or whether that hurt was just on their way to doing it again,
Right. Right.
and just reinforcing that I can do this risky thing and I'm not going to die. I can go to college and I've got this test and they can know they're going to get through it and they're not going to die, as opposed to what might become as an adult an unreasonable amount of anxiety surrounding
Right.
that task, the
And maybe
risk
not
that comes
just,
with failure.
yeah, and maybe not, well, which is, it's a similar concept, not just that they're going to die, but that the world will end or their world will end, which is the same thing as death, basically. But the fact that you can endure or you can become something different or that maybe you can change the world. So, hey, friends, we're just going to keep on going with this conversation because it's so cool. Scott Minor, welcome. He is the founder, administrator, chief geek and genius or whatever it all behind RealmMakers. They've had a fantastic year. They've got an expo they've launched recently. They've got an online community. And I'm the host of, hi, I'm Dominic, founder of LegendFiction. We have our own con called LegendHaven that we do online every year. And Scott and I hit it off a year ago and just realized, wow, we're doing such similar things. We're trying to do something helpful. We're trying to bolster readers and writers. And I asked Scott, this whole theme of healing the storyteller. If we can heal the storyteller, we can heal the imagination. And if we can heal the imagination, we can maybe heal the culture. And right now, not just perhaps in politics, there's massive divisions going on. There's a lot of conversation happening like right now, but also in fandoms. There's a lot of, I don't go to enough actual Comic Con, so I've kind of missed out on a lot of the negativity about how there's a lot of toxic behavior or expectations or just all of this going on. I read this recent write-up on a Based Con review about how we need new cons or we need new, I don't know, code of ethics or something about how we treat each other. And it's because what we're getting is just not good enough. We're not actually using fandoms and fiction to heal each other and to bring each other together. And they're turning into the same kind of savaging, arenas and battlegrounds for ideas as opposed to a chance to celebrate and have fun. And yes, I mean, we take these things seriously, but not so seriously that you start attacking and going after other people and actually harming them. And so I thought, okay, Scott, you run cons. You've been doing it how long has Realmmakers been around? I think it's 10 years. Is that right?
Oh, longer than that. Well, so we just had our 13th annual conference in July.
13. Amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've had our online community since 2021. We started building it in 2020. Yeah, our mobile bookstore since 2017, physical bookstore also opened in 2021. We've been running the Realm Awards since 2016. Trying
Amazing.
to acknowledge the best fiction, fantasy, and science fiction by Christian authors of faith-driven creators. And I always want to clarify a little bit in terms of Realm Makers. My wife Becky started that. I was really
Oh,
just
okay.
the author's husband. It's gotten to the point where I am now CEO of Realm Makers. She is president and founder of
Gotcha.
Realm Makers. And with all the different things that we do, we have the certain things, we stay much more in our lane to some degree. Whereas she runs the conference and the awards program and the annual retreat, I very much run the mobile bookstore, our physical bookstore, the online community, and generally am more outbound and vision focused on where we're going in the future, which has been a large conversation over the last several years.
Yeah. So let's keep talking about this theme of healing the storyteller, because as you were just saying, and we were chatting as we hit record, this sense of, here's the way I see it: the future is built by those who get there first. And quite frankly, I think dreamers and storytellers are people who spend a lot of time perhaps envisaging the future, or thinking really hard about narratives and stories, the kind of people we want to be or need to go out and maybe you can't actually risk your life for some reason, but you can do that through story form, to field test and stress test yourself and decide
Yes.
if you want to become something else or somebody else, right? And then these stories can take off and they can unite huge swaths of people around a common narrative, a common idea, a common way of being. I believe that's one reason why mythology, for example, is such a powerful thing. It unites entire clans and nations and peoples together around here's how we go about doing this, and here's how we get into the future, or here's how we survive, right? And if you get to a point where you have no idea what the future is going to be like, you don't trust it, and you're afraid of it, okay, that's a problem. And if you don't have storytellers creating stories that bring to the general public, I mean, you can have stories, for specific niche groups and so on, but we're here more for the pop fiction, and the sense of fiction for the masses, people who want to read and imagine and become better people. Why would you want to do that? So that you can live into the future, so you can build a future we believe in. And if we have what's kind of happening now, stories being promoted that we read them and we're like, okay, maybe it's fun for a minute, but it's like popcorn, and not even very good popcorn. It doesn't feed you, it doesn't sustain you, it's not something you can night around. And if that's it, and there's nothing any deeper being created or promoted, then our imagination doesn't have anything to build around, to feed on, to get stronger with, because an imagination is a central part of what it means to be human. It's not just fun, psychic, static. It's how we're able to connect with each other, and quite frankly with ourselves, to be able to dream of and think about a future, and to be able to pass it on to our children. And so we're looking around and we're seeing a whole lot of people getting up in arms and writing stories that we don't believe in. So I see groups like RealmMakers, and then what we're doing over at LegendFiction is like, no, stories are how our souls survive. So if we want to heal the culture, the way that we all come in together and live together, then we need to heal the imagination, our ability to think together and feel together about how we do stuff together. Well, to do that, we need to heal storytellers. And I thought, okay, I want to hear what goes through your mind after 13 years of now playing in this sandpit, and what your diagnosis and then recommendations are for something like that. Massive
Sure,
question.
sure. Well, I mean, so much of it comes down to finding a common story. And in so much of the stories that I encounter being told when I just, we turn on some streaming show or a movie, that's a story that we think we'd be interested in. Suddenly we're watching or listening to a story that it doesn't reflect us, or we don't feel a commonality with what we're watching. We feel like somebody is saying that who we are is actually invalid. We need to change, and that these other examples that are being presented, like this is what you should become, and it's more on the periphery. I feel like there's so much of most of us in a community, in a culture, in a country, that are really focused on developing our own stories, our own lives. And the entertainment that we pursue is something that we want to enjoy and feel like we have this common thread with the people around us and the people that we're watching. I remember as a young man watching movies, particularly Forrest Gump or Far and Away, where I felt an affinity to the person who I was watching on the screen. And I would think to myself, watching Far and Away, it's like, I want to go get my land. I want to start my life. Right. And feeling that prompting in a young man to go like, that's what building your life looks like: going out, risking your life, heading out into the unknown for an adventure, to find your land, to find your community, to find your work, and to build your family and your life. And that really spoke to me. And it's really hard for young people to do that right now. And when you're faced with that drive at the moment that you're a young man and you want to have that adventure and take that risk and find your land and create your work, and you just encounter that you can't afford anything, you can't find anything,
Yeah.
you
Right.
don't have these choices, and so you end up sitting somewhere just digesting other people's stories or playing video games in the basement, watching other stories, watching other fictional people have these stories that you don't get to engage with. And the inability for us to create our own stories, and the fact that when we go to school, it doesn't encourage us to do that, right? It just encourages you to go find somewhere else, find someone to go work for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a shallow, it feels at the beginning of your life, at the beginning of your adult life, like such a shallow option that people are just searching everywhere else for a better story. And the people creating our media aren't doing that. And well, we know, you and I know, that there's this greatest story ever told, right? That helps us to be able to listen to a story that speaks to our soul, that tells us, as messed up as you are, something's been done to redeem you, and that you have worth and you have value and you're worthy to be loved, right? And to help that, the story you're telling yourself, that self-talk that's just always going on in your own head, some people more than others, right? What is that story you're telling yourselves? And what is the community around you speaking into that, right? And if you're telling yourself things that aren't true, and the people around you are telling you, no, 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 you're right, you are all you need, everything that you think you are, you can be. Truth be damned, right? And so then the people who step into your life and tell you the truth, well, now you damn them because you just want to be in your own story that you've crafted out of fiction, out of whole cloth, out of your own head, because there isn't a common story that is being told. I mean, there has been one, and sometimes it's quite flawed, but it's the expectation that there's some perfect story that we could tell ourselves that is going to be without the ability to criticize it. It all comes down to the Bible, the story of Jesus Christ. It gives us that strong foundation of truth in a world that will tell you that you can make up your own truth. And how far down the rabbit hole can you go when you're just making it up as you go along? It seems so hopeless. But how do you tell somebody through a story? How do you heal the culture? How do you heal the imagination of the world by telling fictional stories? It's one-on-one. It's a little bit at a time. It's gradual over the course of years. If you're listening to stories that tell you, this isn't all about you. Sacrifice is better than wielding power over someone. That's not telling somebody, it's not witnessing to them, it's not evangelizing, it's telling them something that's biblical truth. But within the context of a fictional story, that might be all that a storyteller, a Christian storyteller, a storyteller of faith with good motivations to impact the reader with a story where they learn, it's, I'm going to sacrifice my time as a father, and I'm not going to do this thing that I want to do. Maybe they want to play video games, or maybe they want to be unfaithful when they're out on a trip, right? And this, I'm going to sacrifice this desire of mine. I'm going to sacrifice my time for my wife, for my children, for the world, right? And then when there's someone out there who's brave enough to sacrifice everything to try to bring civility and truth to a community at a college or university, to say, hey, here's something I think, prove me wrong. Let's talk about it, right? Let's use words, right? And how much bravery does it take to put everything you're thinking out into the world? I mean, who among us could survive everything that we thought being spoken and put out on social media 5 minutes later, you know, we would all be creating our own villains because there are people who disagree with us, you know? It takes such a degree of bravery and honesty to say what you're honestly thinking. And when you get two people who are pursuing a common goal that's good, who disagree, well, if we're both trying to get closer to Jesus, we're going to become closer together. And if one of us is a little off track, by pursuing the truth, getting closer to Jesus, we will become closer together as people, as individuals. And that's what we try to do with Realmmakers. You know, we don't make political statements. Every fantasy or sci-fi con out there is, as soon as you go to register, it's making political comments or societal comments. And the ones that are doing the opposite are doing the complete opposite. Like, we're not like those people. We're not like those cons. And for Realmmakers, we just want, you know, we want everyone to come and just to know that at Realmmakers, we're all trying to become closer to Jesus. And if we disagree, we're not going to focus on that while we're in community with each other. My battle is not against flesh and blood. It's not with you, a person, right? It's with the ideology. And I'm not going to wield that at our community event. I'm not going to wield that through our community organization, our company. We're going to seek to create that community so that when we write a story that maybe you went too far in that story, their editor says, their friend who's an author says, maybe that's not, you know, what are you trying to communicate there? Because and I'm being non-specific, so I can't really get specific, but just to be able to call ourselves out when we do make a mistake in Christian grace and help each other to become closer to Jesus, or to do what we feel Jesus would have us do, or what we feel led to through the Holy Spirit, because not everybody has the same level of ability to endure, for instance, horror versus fantasy or science fiction. You know, it's deciding what story we're going to tell and thinking about it long enough to not be careless about the stories we tell. There's so much out there that is so intentionally trying to cause damage, to cause
Right.
harm, that and each one thinks the other one is the one causing harm, right? So how do you respond in that moment?
This, I think, is the power or just the magic of, I mean, you can maybe call it the Christian witness, but it's this commitment to discipling Christ, to being present to another person, to try to be present also to yourself and what's happening in your life, and to be able to share that without trying to shout somebody down. This is one thing I love specifically about fiction and why I think it's so powerful, because you can share an idea. And we've seen this, well, pundits and, debates and so on. You drop an idea that might be maximally true, and the other person, it just, their eyes glaze over. It like means nothing to them. Like you talked earlier about somebody having negative self-talk, or a story that's completely different to your own, that orients and organizes their life, and then you give them an idea that might be genuinely good and helpful, and it doesn't land. They can't hear it. They don't have the ears to hear. And I'm thinking then about, there's stories that I've read, some that did try to push an agenda, push an idea, and by the end, I just had a sense of distaste. I'm like, this wasn't a real story. This was perhaps a tract, gift wrapped in prose and poetry or something. It's like this wasn't an authentic, actual effort to tell a story. So it then just gets me thinking, well, then what actually is a story? What are we trying to do with a story? How is it healing the imagination? How does it heal a person? Because there are novels that I've read, you've probably read them too, where it feels like what is it, a walk to Emmaus moment. You get to the end, and then there's a light, there's a glowing, there's a heat kind of going in your heart. There's something that you love about that story. It could be the point of the story, it could be a specific character in that story. There's something about that that fills you with, maybe it could be a slightly convicting joy to be alive, to try again, carry it on. You've not been hit over the head or called out to become or do something different on somebody else's terms. The beauty, I think, of fiction is that you feel through the experience of a character, and the struggles that that character goes through to then reach a point that an author hopes will fill you with as much life as the author has, or the kind of life that it has brought to the character in the story. And so then by the end, you feel like, I can accept this path. I can accept this choice. It feels like it's my own. I agree with it. I love it. Fiction is, I think it's definitely a longer play. It's a longer conversation. It's a longer accompanying with other people. And so I think it's trying to do something very different to, a preacher or an evangelist. It's a different mode of trying to communicate truth. And I think it's more of a lived experience, something that you feel through rather than something that is clear as day. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it becomes clear in moments of pain. When it comes to healing the storyteller, healing anything, you can only heal something that perceives pain, right? When somebody is in a position where they feel like nothing's wrong, it's really hard to go to them and encourage them in some way to heal themselves, mentally or physically. So there's that community that is built around pain, around suffering. When people suffer in the same way, misery loves company, so to speak, right? It's so true. And it creates community. But when you present, so it's very easy to communicate to people who are feeling the same pain. You can find them, you can bring them together. But then what do you offer them? Are we doing that? Are we finding people in their pain? As Christians, it's very much like whether we're doing it next to us or whether we're going to Africa to do it or some other country, find people who are in pain and give them the right medicine, right? For us, that's the Bible, that's Jesus, that's the truth. And for a large number of other people, it is telling them that they're enough. They can heal themselves, which doesn't get you anywhere. But it's imperative to find people when they're at the point of suffering. That's when change happens. That's when people are more open, perhaps, to receiving healing from another person.
It's exactly what we do with our characters in our stories. Put them up a tree and throw
Absolutely.
rocks at them. We make
If nothing
everything
bad ever happened, it would be a
constantly
really
worse.
boring story.
Yeah. So to your point, you were saying something earlier. It's like there's a war of stories going on. We need better narratives. We're seeing a fallout right now, and again, not just politics, but across our culture, we're seeing a fallout as we begin to realize whatever stories we're telling ourselves, they're not big enough. Maybe they're not good enough. They're not strong enough because a story has to unite people to be a good story. It brings people together, gives us a common goal, a common identity. Otherwise, we're all just fighting each other over my story is better than your story, my tradition, my interpretation, my view. And so, well, it's technically, I think you can distill it down that here's my view of how everything works. That's called a story because I have to now live into that and do stuff with that. And life is hard. And I need a story that helps me bear up against that and try to do good with that. Right. The whole world, but specifically our country. And then, we're kind of in running cons like you do with Realmmakers or us with LegendHaven. We're at that kind of a spear tip point of recognizing how do you find or how do you encourage the right story? Because not everybody wants to hear the same one. And this is something your point about Christ and truth, right? You keep coming back to that. We got to share the truth with people. And sometimes I'm encouraged by the sense when Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, right? That means that every access point to the truth is Christ. Every time we accept something that is true, every time we make a 1% sort of conversion or change or reorientation towards truth, whatever that truth is, that engagement with reality, that is Christ right there. I think it's such a different way to, instead of thinking of truth as dogmatic statements, for example, or just Christ merely as a person in time and now somewhere at the right hand of the Father far away. No. He said he is the truth, which means every time our mind, our soul grabs onto something like, yes, I know that this is right, or I'm perceiving it to be right. Now I'm going to try living into that and see if time bears it out, see if experience bears it out. That didn't work. Now let's course correct. And the act of that course correction is a progressive growth, gradual growth towards greater union with truth, which is who is Christ. And I see fiction as a way that we do that, not just with each other, but with everybody outside of our community, outside our tradition. Is here's how we feel about how a person goes and lives out the experience of trying to follow truth. And maybe it's an anti-hero story you tell. And that's somebody who's like, I think I know what the truth is, but like hell am I going to do that? I'm going to do my own thing. And then the whole point of the story is how much pain are you prepared to endure in not learning your lesson. It's kind of like a reverse revelation of or affirmation of truth. That's why I love some of those stories. Rambling a little bit. What do you think? What's going through your mind?
Well, I mean, what occurs to me is what are the alternatives to telling a story where you've got a character and they by the end of the story learn something that has brought them closer to truth, right? What are the alternatives that are being given nowadays? And so much of it now is rather than saying, there is a creator and he created you and he created this world and there is science and those rules they work there because it was created. There was chaos and now there is order, right? A creator brought order out of chaos, and you are not a victim. Well, you don't have to be a victim of the chaos around you. You can hold on to this foundation and take advantage and acknowledge the order that exists and to operate within that order with a way that your feet can be much more firmly planted as you go on to catch the people coming by you and
Right,
save
right, right.
people. You can
Be
only
an
save other
anchor.
people
Right,
if you are not also floating in the river,
right,
right?
right, right.
And some of those alternative stories that we're hearing that we need to be able to identify is that no, there's no creator, right? This is all just random, and you are on your own. You are the one who needs to save yourself, and whatever you think you are, that's what you are, and I'm going to affirm you in that and tell you whatever you think. That's right. I'm going to be your yes person, right? I'm just going to say you're right to everything that you just make up in your own head and let you get further and further and further away from the truth. And then tell you that now your power is in the fact that you are a victim, right? And because you're a victim, there are all these villains now in your life. Everybody around you, they're the villain. Go get them. In reality, they're just being manipulated by someone who wants to watch the world burn.
Mm-hmm.
There's no greater purpose for it than that. And it's sad to watch. And it's important to acknowledge what's actually happening as a storyteller in order to be able to provide any degree of counterpoint. If a Christian creator makes a mistake, it might just be in not acknowledging any of that and just having fun, right? I'm just going to fiddle while the world burns, instead of saying, is there something I can accomplish through my creative?
So I'm going to be really annoying just for a second here, because I know I've seen people talk that way, and I have a sense of, what was this quote I learned the other day? Build a Shire in Mordor. Build a Shire in Mordor. If the world feels like it's going to hell in a handbasket, well, I think that's a point of view, and it could be very well be happening. Here, go with me for a second. I
Sure,
don't
sure.
think that it's ultimately true, because
Mm-hmm.
Christ has already won the ultimate victories. What
Sure.
we're accomplishing is taking that victory and embedding it into our own lives. We're living into it. We're applying it to the world around us. We're healing the world. We're healing ourselves. We're collaborating with him. We're co-creating with him. We're part of this story, who we are, what we can want, the good things that orient our life are how we collaborate with this saving action of involving all of creation, as all things are made new, right? So the nice thing about this metaphor, building a Shire in Mordor, I think, tell me what you think, is that Mordor is technically bounded. It's a fake idea, and if you're stuck like some poor soul in the middle of it, yes, all you can see is how horrible things are. But if you could go 5 miles that way, you'll find the front lines of Gondor, right? But Mordor itself needs to be healed. And I think for some of us, trying to find a way to build a Shire, and I know the metaphor is kind of impossible because Sauron and orcs, but the idea,
Yeah.
the point of play, right? Having fun with fiction, even at the core, I think, of the most playful fiction, that's not trying to like save the world, but it's trying to be good in and of itself. It communicates something that there is joy, um, in how would you say, joy in the fields of the Lord, right? That
Sure,
the
sure.
characters who endure a fun story like that too, even if they don't accomplish massive or great things, or there isn't a very deep, serious message, there's still a meta message that is being communicated as an author has fun with their creativity, and that It is good to be alive. It is good to be here. God himself, God is good. Truth is healing. I think there's multiple levels of different ways that we communicate so many different kinds of truth. The obvious fundamental, the essential truth. God loves you. Worth it. You matter. And sometimes we just gift wrap that in a ton, like we need a million different stories to try to communicate that, to maybe touch a million different people. It's probably not exactly what you were saying, but a thought that
No,
went through my mind.
I do totally agree, actually. I did use the word fun. I think what I was going for was something a bit more maybe frivolous or careless,
Or meaningless,
without,
and that
you know, yeah, without a thought. But when you are grounded in Christ, when you've got that candle at your desk, proverbial, candle,
right.
the Holy Spirit dwells within you, every story you tell is going to resonate with that. There's a degree to which having the community of believers surrounding you helps accomplish that by talking about our story, by reading the Bible and remaining grounded in the truth. That's absolutely essential. And fun is just as absolutely essential. It's important to have the foundation. There's a lot of nuance between every individual creator and what they want to manifest itself, whether they're telling a superhero story or whether they're telling horror, right? Because they're focusing on that suffering that brings unity, right? It's really weird that's true, but I think if you look just about anywhere, it's always a point of suffering that makes people feel like you understand me because you have suffered the same way, right? And all of a sudden you feel like you can unburden your soul, you can talk about your feelings because of that understanding, that common understanding. So
I do think this is what characters do, what stories do, is we draw meaning out of suffering. I think a lot of life, of course, doesn't feel like a story enough. We struggle, I think, with suffering a lot, and especially our modern world, modern context denies that there is any meaning or doesn't know what to do with the idea that we can find meaning in anything. This is why, for our legend fiction community, there's this meaning crisis going on right now, and that we're struggling, we're aimless, we're rootless. I don't think the human soul and psyche can survive long in a situation like that. Stories are one way to bring it back, because what does a character do is they decide, well, here's a worthy goal in this story that I'm going to put all of my effort and struggle and might to try to accomplish. And that means that everything that I endure along the way, no matter how bad and how painful or what obstructive it is, it's all going to be worth it because here's a goal that I absolutely must accomplish, maybe even if it kills me. And I think that there's a reason why there's stories that we keep coming back to over and over and over again. We hunger to feel that feeling because life can feel very aimless. I think you said this earlier. We're not given or allowed to identify maybe why we're here from early on. We're dropped into somebody else's view for what our life should be. And that can put you at odds with specific gifts or callings that you might have. And if you were to be able to pay attention to those, you could feel you could do something more meaningful or valuable, purposeful with your life. And so when you feel that aimless, I think we turn to stories and movies, maybe games. We turn to media and fiction a lot because they're full of examples of people who either created meaning and then tried to follow it until meaning became revealed to them as something very, very clear that made sense of all their sacrifices. And I think a lot of us are in a kind of walking, waking agony because there doesn't seem to be a point to it all. I think there is a gift in the Christian message in that it's like, it doesn't make your suffering any easier. And we're going to sit together and share the fact that we're all suffer in different ways. We can turn it to something good. And maybe we have to just trust in an ultimate goodness that can turn, good out of evil the way he routinely does. And that's a whole messy conversation. And I get that. But I think that's why we turn to stories, because it's like you can find a sense of sanity and your soul can breathe again, because it's what we do with our characters as we put them through these situations.
absolutely. And that's what often provides the inspiration for those who create stories. They've come through this thing, this trial. They have this common pain that they share with other people in a community, and they want to help others beyond the people that they can actually sit next to and speak to and share a similar story, but they do it through fiction, right? And there's a lot of young women who are writing stories for other young women. And, there's all this young adult fiction out there. And that is, I think, one of the real things that drives it is that there are people who want to tell a story that's going to, well, I mean, people have different motivations. Some just want to titillate. It's like, how many books can I sell? It's like, okay, well, let me add more
Just
sex to
stuff,
the
everything. Yeah.
story, and just candy, right? As opposed to, I want to help young women who feel abandoned. I want to write a story for that young woman who feels abandoned. And there's a lot of different ways that can manifest in a story. But you feel driven to help the people that how you might be able to help, right? So there's almost like through fiction a degree of a mission to be able to accomplish those people. And so often they would say, if just one person catches the heart of my story and is healed, that's worth it. But that's not the only reason people would write books. Like I said, it's like, I'm going to write a book because I've got to put food on the table. I've got 3 kids in college, and how am I going to let me write something that's going to just make money. What does everybody else want? What are they hungry for? And I'm going to feed that. Right now, there's some virtue in finding what's everybody hungry for. I'm going to feed that. I'm going to give them something good, right? There's value in that. I just wish the powers that be weren't, well, just deciding, I'm not going to make that. I'm not going to put that on the table. Sorry.
Right. Marshaled against it almost. So thinking forward
Right,
into
right.
unless you want to say anything else, I want to ask about the future of realm makers and how you're solving, contributing like that specific problem. There's a lot of gatekeeping. There's, not just algorithms, but there's also people don't know what is healthy, don't know what they want. We need these bigger unifying stories. And I see all of the authors at realm makers, they're animated by that same, sort of Emmaus. We've seen something in the breaking of the bread and in uh, a moment, an experience, or something meant something, and now we're alive. There's a bit of fire. We want to share that. Stuff's got to mean stuff, and so we mess around with fiction to field test, the moral imagination and to share ultimate truth, but in a way that's an enjoyable experience. Here's what I think. I think fiction is a way that you share a truth that you literally cannot straight up tell someone. I think that there are some ideas that you can communicate just straight up and tell them. You write it down. It's in Cliff's notes. But the idea in fiction is more multi-sided, and you actually need to sit with something for 50,000 words, 100,000 words. It needs to be a 2-hour immersion in a character's life to be able to get that idea. And I think authors are that specific sort of part of the spectrum of the human experience that are called to or gifted with that call to share those kinds of ideas. And maybe you got to write 50 books to kind of flex that muscle, begin to figure out how to even do that. I love this one line that goes, all the way to heaven is heaven. This is one of the Catholic mystics who speaks like that, because every step is an engagement with Christ, with truth. And so every incremental step and growth that you make can be good, can be wonderful, can be meaningful. And so for an author, just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I need to do this. It's like, well, maybe you need to do it for 50 novels, and just have fun to figure out who you're supposed to be. You make 1,000 pots to finally make the pot that's like, this is why I'm here. Sometimes it takes time. It doesn't happen the first time round. So that was a bit of a detour. My question was for realm makers, where are you all going, and what do you see what are you building towards, or what are you thinking for the next couple of years?
Well, we made some significant changes just this last conference in 2025, July. And where that really goes is broadening the storytellers who we support at the conference. It's always been Christian authors of fantasy and science fiction. There are writers in every form of medium, whether you're engaged with film or animation or comics or audio drama. And there's a lot of the same people. Like when you meet the people, they're the same people, just operating in a different artistic medium. And they're having the same pain of not being able to get their artwork out there or noticed, or ideologically just not being aligned with the powers that be, who are in charge of who gets to be popular and promoted. And Realmmakers is a place where we can provide different opportunities depending on where you're at. There would be a track for spiritual formation. There'd be a track for just marketing, getting your stuff out there because you're ready and you just want to take the next step in accomplishing your personal business goals. Or just there are people at the beginning of their career and they haven't yet finished a first novel and they need to learn craft or story, world building. So people can be fed, educated, edified, encouraged, inspired by coming and joining Christian community of people that they can talk to and be understood, right? So many of the creators we know, when they're at church and they say what they do, people will point to them and say, how can you call yourself a Christian and write horror or write about dragons or create video games or whatever it is that you do? Because they've got something in their head that tells them, well, that's evil because somebody told me that's evil, or there's only one way to look at this. And so they feel like when they're at church, they have to restrain how much they share about their creative world.
Right.
And if they're a professional in the creative world, they have to restrain how they talk about their faith. And at Realmmakers, they can share fully their entire selves, their creative Christian selves. And that is encouraging. That is confidence building. That is community building, to where now when they go back to their homes, they have people that they've connected with in person, who they can continue to be engaged with online in ways that was never possible. Gosh, I don't know how many years ago I'd have to say before you could sit here like you and I and be talking and see each other. That was like the Flintstones when I was a kid, talking to somebody on a video call. But that's really what Realmmakers is seeking to do, to broaden our ability to speak into Christian creative professionals across many different industries. And so that's one way that we're growing into the future. We did in 2025 and more so in the future. And the other way is to take efforts, take risks, to spend resources to bring the readers, to bring the audience to meet the storytellers who are telling better stories. Because there isn't a New York Times bestselling book out there that isn't bought by mostly Christians. If Christians don't engage in watching a movie or buying a book, it's not successful. Because as much as people would observe that, oh, we live in a post-Christian nation, they might say, I thoroughly disagree. I thoroughly disagree. It's just the people on the fringe are dominating the public conversation. And most people are too busy with their own life to be engaging in that political discourse, right? They're just going about their lives feeling like a bit unguided. And the people who are creating that we're inviting to Realmmakers aren't necessarily creating Christian things. They're just creating things that they are driven to create. Could be fun, could be horrible, could be, just like, and then, King Kong punches Godzilla in the face. It's just amazing. And other people are like, well, let's just go totally off the wall and let's just make up things that are going to be like a car crash, and then and say things in jest. And then authors like
Right.
Carrie Neitz will take it seriously and go like, wait a minute, Amish vampires in space. That's awesome. I'm going to write that story. I take that challenge and get an A+. There's a degree of needing to engage with humor and love and care and kindness and not mistake that for lying. You don't have to lie in order to love someone or care for them or be kind to them, right? You need to share the truth. That's love, and share it with kindness and have it not be perceived as violence. There's just so much that is part of the conversation right now that is just mind-boggling, and it's hard to engage with it. It just sets your own mind reeling, and that's sometimes what spurs some creatives, like in our community, to actually want to do something about it. Right. And that's where you start to think more intentionally about, this is something that I want to change in the world. I'm going to write a story where I'm trying to accomplish that. On the negative side, that starts to, like, well, am I writing, you know, just propaganda now? Is that what I'm doing? You don't, certainly not doing that, but to tell a story that, in the context of trying to destroy the monster, that you discover that you have now become a monster, and that you're no better than the monsters that you're seeking out to kill, and that you need to like shake the Etch-a-Sketch, right? Everyone needs to do this, to like reevaluate everything that they have been taught and relearn it. Now, there's a degree to which that drives people to deconstruct their Christianity. There's a degree to which, though, when something is true, right? When you take that sand and dirt and gold and water and you shake it up and you slide it out, what's most likely to stay is the gold. Now, you can be careless and toss everything out because you didn't know what you're looking for. But when, much of my recent adult life has been kind of taking the red pill, so to speak, and reorganizing my thoughts and reorganizing my priorities. And it's good to do that when you're rooted in a foundation that's going to keep you focused. It's very dangerous when you just say, hey, I've been raised this certain way and I'm going to rebel. Doesn't matter where I'm going, I'm just going to go the opposite direction without any degree of foundation, and it's in fiction, it's in the stories that we could write that help that person write themselves, because they're not hearing it from their father, they're not hearing it from their mother, they're not hearing it from the people they don't want to hear anything from, right? They're hearing it from this character that they, over the course of 50,000 words, have come to appreciate and feel an affinity for, and it resonates with them. And what lesson that character learns is going to be something that they're going to consider, whether they like it or not, right? And where in that fiction are you going to bring that person who reads your story?
Yeah.
Right.
Amazing.
So in my previous comment, where I said, oh, we could just kind of be careless and write something fun, more accurately stated, it's just being, intentional about what conclusions we want people to draw after reading our book. What themes are we putting into this story? And are they coherent in terms of a biblical worldview?
Closing thoughts, Scott. What is what's next for Realmmakers? When is your next event? I think you have a retreat.
Yes, we've got a writer's retreat, which focuses much more on soul care. It's going to be February, maybe the third week of February, down on the Emerald Coast of the Florida Panhandle, Laguna Beach Resort. And that's going to be amazing. Everyone's glad to hear we're not going to the, oftentimes we go to Colorado Springs for our retreat. And they think,
I
why
was
are you
going to
going
joke,
north
Colorado.
in the winter? It's like, well, it's kind of gorgeous in
Have
the
you seen
winter,
Christmas?
just saying,
Yeah.
especially at the very tail end of the winter. But, and we might go back there again, but this year we're in Florida. And Lindsay Franklin is going to be the instructor. Just yesterday opened up registration. So if people are interested in a soul care writer's retreat, or just if you're creating anything, you can go to retreat.realmmakers.com. And shortly after the, we've launched the retreat, and then we're going to launch the awards, the Realm Awards. So if you published a novel or a graphic novel or narrative for video games in the calendar year of 2025, starting the beginning of December, you'll be able to submit your work for the Realm Awards and potentially be rewarded with a Realm Award at the Realmmakers Conference. Every year we present Realm Awards, and that's this year. Our conference is going to be back in St. Louis, but at a bigger, grander venue than before, because we grew out of our previous venue. So now we'll be at the St. Louis Union Station. So this gorgeous World War II era train station turned mall, converted into convention center that is attached to the wonderful grounds of entertainment and food. So we're going to be growing further into more industries, larger expo, having time that we're inviting the public to come in and engage with the creators and buy their stuff. So we're trying to grow that. It's a hard nut to crack, because Christians aren't necessarily looking for Christian outlets to find stories. They're just finding the stories that are presented to them, right? They turn on the TV, they turn on the radio, they hear what's being presented to them by the people who have the most money to promote them. But to the degree that we can communicate locally across the entire spectrum of people, not just through Christian radio stations, but to find those people who want to digest a better story and come to Realmmakers Expo. That'll be June 24th to the 27th, 2026.
Amazing.
So there's a lot of things going on, and it's we're trying to develop a larger team to bring everything together, and it's been really a dynamic adventure. This is really the big adventure that Becky and I are on, and it's really fantastic to be on that journey
That's
together.
awesome.
We're now empty nesters, so there's a degree to which I can imagine there are people, once your kids are all out of the house, you're like, well, gee, who am I now? Who are you? Who are we? Are we anything anymore without kids here? And it's nice to be able to have this already firm planted
Underway
adventure that we're both on together, that we just have a bit more time to engage with.
Well, that Florida retreat sounds like a perfect follow-up to some of this conversation, the idea of healing the storyteller.
Absolutely.
So I hope that people get a ton out of that. I hope it's a wonderful thing. And I think as far as our con with LegendHaven, we're a whole lot smaller than Realmmakers, but hey, we're trucking along. I think I met you last year, and I think you've been kind of watching what we've been up to maybe for about a year now.
Yeah. I
And
pop into your online. You've got your own private social network.
Our own community with LegendFiction. There will be links in the descriptions, friends. You can go check out what Scott is talking about. And then if you enjoy this sort of thing, which if you're watching this conversation, you probably do, LegendHaven is back online mid-October. So there's a link in that description. It's free for storytellers and authors to come in and join our expo and spend time with people. And then everybody is welcome to come hang out with us too. Animated by the same thing Realmmakers is trying to accomplish too. So far, we're just doing it online. But gosh, we'd love to do it in person someday. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, my prayer for Realmmakers is that it's a way for people to find other communities, not just Realmmakers. That
we
people
hope
could
to
come
be a
to
Realmmakers one of these years. That's absolutely a
have a
bucket
meetup,
list.
have a
We're going to do it.
LegendFiction meetup. Have a little area, have a booth, share your authors with our community, and those authors who are in the Realmmakers community who are like, well, I'm Catholic and I've been coming to Realmmakers. You've got, Catholic and Orthodox. Like, we encourage people to go to other communities than our own, because it is in everyone's best interest, and nobody goes away and stays away forever. So we'd love to see a group from LegendHaven and LegendFiction at Realmmakers 2026. Be pleased to have you there.